Good evening. Chair, if you can find one, we're going to get started in about 2 minutes. I've got some folks joining us still by Zoom, but I want to get into the room. So if you haven't already found a spot, and while you're looking for your spot, and this is for everybody who's online as well, we are from the city of Clive, for some of the Clive specific portions of this project, going to be building an email distribution list so that you can get regular updates by email, in addition to going to the websites for all the cities. The sign-in sheet in the back is one way you can get on that. You can also email Little Walnut Creek at cityofclive.com. Or for those online tonight, if you want to just go ahead and put your email address in the chat and send it directly via chat to Pete DeCook. I'm the moderator tonight. Then I will be able to take it from there and get you added to the list. And I'll add those instructions for everybody online on how to get yourself on the list as we get further into the meeting. You can tell all of my colleagues are, the folks who come late to church standing in the back right back there. They're all the people that we have the great pleasure to work with. So why don't we start with some introductions? And thank you to all of you. It's a cold night. We got some rough weather coming at us, but we appreciate everybody joining us, and we appreciate everybody joining us on Zoom. My name is Pete DeCook. I'm the Assistant City Manager for the City of Clive. Before I go further, just want to make sure if I could get a yes from some folks via chat that you all can hear us on Zoom. Should be able to. Or a thumbs up emoji. We've got them. Okay, so first let me start with my friend from Waukee, Rudy. Rudy, if you'd introduce yourself.
I'm going to get close to the microphone here for the folks online, but I'm Rudy Castor. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Waukee. Pete and myself are kind of tag team in this presentation tonight, but we have a number of our staff coworkers here in the room to help as we kind of break out into some small group discussions one-on-one. We have maps in the back so we can kind of visually point, look, and show us where your home is, and we'll talk through what's happening adjacent to that in the Greenbelt area. So great. I'll leave it for that.
Great. In a second, Rudy will come back up and take us through the first part of this project, but sort of setting the stage so everybody understands. This is a collaboration among 3 cities, and there are multiple stages in this collaboration. Some of it is related to the sewer project. A lot of it is related to trails. It's related to reforestation. It's related to stabilization of the stream bank. As many people I'm sure out here know, some of those banks they're looking at on Little Walnut Creek right now have done a lot of cutting and a lot of spreading, some places where it's pretty vertical as well. That's part of this discussion tonight as well. I forgot to start by also acknowledging our elected officials and staff. So if we could quickly kind of go from my colleague Richard there and make our way around the room, and folks can introduce themselves quickly.
Richard Brown, City of Clive. Ben Weaver, Class City Council. Forrest Aldridge for East and Tim. I'm the design engineer for the sewer part of the project. Joe Howard, Clive Public Works. Matt McQuillan, Clive City Manager. Brad East, Waukee City Manager. Curtis Brown, Assistant City Manager. Jeff Knight, and John Larson, I'm the Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Yeah. And Dr. Joel Frey, who's the principal here at Schuler Elementary, who's hanging out with us tonight and has very graciously allowed us to use this wonderful space.
And one more introduction. Zach next to the doctor over there. He's with S.J. Lewis, who's a sewer contractor, so he's representing them. So we have one of those that have been here tonight as well to help us with any questions.
Great. We have a short presentation, and then we're going to get into questions. We'll be taking questions both online from folks via chat and from all of you here in the room as well. So bear with us as we try and keep our hands moving fast enough to keep everybody engaged with the meeting. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Brad to take us through these first few slides and get everybody oriented with the space that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking Brad.
Yeah. Brad, you're off the hook. It's okay. But I'll start here. This is an overall simple visual map here to kind of show the orange line up there represents that sewer. It's just over 3.5 miles worth of sewer that we're going to be installing. And it starts at that confluence of Little Walnut Creek and North Walnut Creek or Walnut Creek. Off to the right of the screen you see up there. continues to the west, following the stream corridor. And then it ends just on the west side of North Warrior Lane in Waukee. So a very small snippet of that project is in Waukee itself. The majority is in our neighboring communities of Urbandale and Clive. And so this project in total is about a $13 million cost for the city of Waukee. We're taking that on solely. And with that, we're utilizing some unique funding that the state of Iowa offers. It's the state revolving fund. And so with that, it's a low interest loan that the city can utilize. And the unique thing with that, because of the stipulations with that funding source, is you can convert some of that interest to principal, and you can apply that principal monies towards a water quality project, stream bank stabilization, for example. Over a year and a half ago, we doing the city of Waukee, working with some of our engineering staff, looking at our sanitary sewer system, recognize that we're going to need to increase some of that infrastructure, increase the capacity of that. We said, well, there's an option for that. We pump it, or we can send it downhill via gravity. Both costs financially are about equal. Gravity doesn't have the energy costs that you have over time with a pumping solution. So we said, hey, let's explore that opportunity with our neighboring communities, Clive and Urbandale. What's their temperature on that? Just so happens, Clive was starting their efforts with Walnut Creek or Little Walnut Creek stream bank restoration. So from there, it kind of took off. And so this is over 12 months worth of work amongst all of our city staffs, our outside consultants, to make this a reality. And so here we are, actually ready to start that groundbreaking work. And then it's going to be carrying on for several years into the future, starting with the sewer project, but then stepping into that stream bank restoration and reforestation that Pete mentioned. So this map up here represents that. You can see the major roadway, arterial roadways, starting at 156th Street. We're east of there, about half a mile, and then continuing west, crossing that major thoroughfare, Alice's Road, and then again crossing that North Warrior Lane. So when we do cross those roadways, we'll be we'll be boring under those roads, so no disruption to traffic as we're constructing there. We do have some ingress egress pathways for the contractor to get equipment unloaded, make its way down into the Greenbelt area for construction purposes. But really, those are temporary, matter of hours or minutes, whether stopping a truck, unloading a piece of equipment, or pulling off, really just slowing down to pull off. So really no disruptions to those major thoroughfares. There's tens of thousands of vehicles traveling those daily. We don't want to disrupt that traffic. So we proceed forward then with our construction. So running this parallel to Little Walnut Creek, again, I mentioned it goes through the majority through Clive and Urbandale. I mentioned that cost up there. And again, that's solely the city of Waukee's cost for the sewer portion. There's an additional cost for the stream bank restoration piece that Pete will touch base on, but that is Waukee's investment to start off this project. So it is connecting, paralleling connecting an existing trunk sewer. On that previous map, about 3/4 of that sewer is paralleling an existing trunk sewer. The pipe that we're putting in the ground is 30 inches in diameter. The existing one that we'll be paralleling is ranging from 18 to 24 inches. Sufficient capacity currently as it's servicing the communities of Urbandale and Clive. The 30-inch pipe allows for the additional sewer capacity that Waukee anticipates in the next 40 years. Currently, that pumping station I mentioned earlier it has a maximum pumping capacity of 3 million gallons a day. As the northwest quadrant of Waukee builds out, we're anticipating that increasing to 10 million gallons a day. So this 30-inch pipe will accommodate that sewer flow. With this work, it's very unique as well, as all the work is strictly on city or municipal owned property. So Urbandale and Clive and a little bit of Waukee own the interest on these where the sewer is being constructed. So we have this broken out into 3 phases. So with this is not necessarily how the contractor intends to tackle this project. It's just really that we want some hard deadlines or completion dates for these phases to allow for that stream bank restoration project to start appropriately later this calendar year, and then make their dates that they anticipate setting with that project. So this is phase 1 would be between Alice's Road and the shared corporate boundary of Clive and Urbandale. And our target completion date for that phase 1 is August of 23. And I'll show that map up there again with these locations. And then our phase 2 section would be between Alice's Road and the shared corporate boundary of Waukee and Clive. So pretty much between Alice's Road and North Warrior Lane. And then really phase 3 is everything else has to be completed by that September 2024. That also includes decommissioning and removing that lift station. So there is some work once the sewer's in and once we're doing restoration through the greenbelt, there's still some work on the up end that needs to be completed that really has no bear on the trail or restoration efforts once those are undertaken. So here's that graphical representation stages. It's kind of out of order, right? You'd think left to right sequentially, but that stage one is in the city of Clive, and that's really where they want to start with that stream bank restoration project. And so that's where we said, hey, we need that hard August of 23 completion date so that they can start their project appropriately later this year and continue their work so that they're getting restoration completed appropriately and trail reconstructed and reopened. Therefore, then stage two, again, is that section between Alice's Road and North Warrior Lane. And then stage three is that section in Urbandale. S.J. Lewis and our conversation with them, they intend to start on the right-hand side or the very downstream side of the sewer and working west. They anticipate putting one crew on that. And they believe that with their production rate, they can march west and meet those completion dates for stages 1 and 2 and 3 by just starting on the east side with one crew and going westerly. Again, that's their preliminary schedule, and certainly Zach's here to chime in if there is anything I misstate on that. So, but they're currently working on this green line that you see kind of going vertically on the right-hand side of the map. That is the Grimes WRA interconnect sewer. And so we're connecting into that. That's about a 66-inch diameter pipe, I believe. And so our pipe, we're putting in the ground is about half of that. We worked with them to upsize that pipe at this connection point further downstream to allow or to accommodate that 10 million gallons of flow. And so S.J. Lewis is working on that project, and they anticipate wrapping that up here in the weeks to come and then migrating that sewer crew to this project. So they're certainly familiar with that, the neighborhood, the area, and the construction, the type of construction that we're working on here. So this sewer, as Pete kind of opened up with comments, is a collaborative effort. It's a multi-project collaboration amongst these cities to extend infrastructure, connect regional trails, and improve the natural spaces that are out there currently. We believe at the completion of the project, we'll be leaving it better than it is today. And that is our goal on that. And certainly we worked hard amongst all of our city staffs and our design staff to accomplish that with our construction drawings to date. Okay. So the end result, I mentioned that this sewer is to serve growing neighborhoods in the city of Waukee. I mentioned also that paralleling sewer. We actually will interconnect with that sewer in 3 locations as we go there. With gravity sewers, you're really limited on what you can do for slopes to try to avoid existing utilities. And well, when one existing utility is 24 inches and the other one's 3.5 feet or almost 3 feet in diameter, it's really hard to go above and below. So we have to actually intersect that existing sewer in 3 locations. The sewer that will then become co-mingling and run parallel where they are proposed to be installed. But ultimately, following the sewer construction, stream bank stabilization and erosion control work on Little Walnut Creek will continue, and then expansion of that existing trail network, connecting Urbandale's Walnut Creek Regional Park trails, Clive's Greenbelt trails, and then ultimately lastly the Raccoon River Valley Trail. And last but not least, extensive reforestation and habitat restoration, both Clive and Urbandale. Time schedule for that you can see up there between the years of 26 and 2030. Alice's Road, I'm sure that was some previously submitted comments. The widening of Alice's Road is anticipated to continue in those calendar years shown up there on the screen. Certainly Clive and Urbandale have started with those efforts north of Meredith to Waterford, and then Waukee has been working on that project towards the south of Douglas Parkway. So I'm going to hand it over to Pete.
Great. And Rudy will be coming back to help answer some of the technical questions about the sewer project and the others that are related specifically to the city of Waukee, as will our colleagues. Bear with me just one moment. I want to make sure that everybody who's been trying to enter online has been able to join us. Okay. So building on what Rudy said, here we sit, 2023. You see a date up there that says 2030. We know with big projects like this, time can also start to drift a little bit on us for things that are beyond our control. We're talking about many, many years, possibly even a decade of investment in your neighborhoods that are being made by the cities of Waukee, Clive, and Urbandale. And at the end of the day, we do believe that we're going to be better off than where we sit today. But getting to that point is going to require some disruption. As little disruption as we hope as possible, but it is going to be at times disruptive. And I want to make sure tonight that we're very clear about what some of those immediate disruptions might be as we get into the sewer project and some of the ways we're working quickly behind that work to mitigate any issues that we create for the neighborhoods. First, let's talk about trees. We received before the presentation tonight for our meeting, a number of questions about how many trees are going to be coming down in the corridor. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. If you walk the trail in Clive today, you'll see a number of stakes that have been put up showing what the construction easement area is for the sewer work that needs to be done. We're talking about a big trench. We're talking about very precise gravity sewer that needs to be constructed. We need big equipment, and that means they're going to be tearing up the trail and needing to make space by clearing out a number of trees. However, we are absolutely committed to keeping as many of those mature native species as possible. The tree clearing is going to be the first thing that you see as we get into this project, starting as early March. The other challenging part of it is tree clearing for the entire 3 mile plus corridor has to be completed really in the month of March so that we comply with some rules about protecting different species that are present in this natural space. It'll be a dramatic change for many of you, especially those of you who live right alongside the creek or right alongside the trail. After we've completed the sewer project, there will also be places where the city of Clive, as part of our restoration work, will need to get in closer to the bank of the creek so that we can stabilize in areas. That also could mean bringing some trees out. But as part of our stabilization efforts, and certainly our restoration efforts, we want to leave this condition of the area as natural as possible after we've done all this work. So think of it sort of like a Band-Aid. We have to go in there, we've got to put a Band-Aid on this, but we don't want to keep putting more Band-Aids on and ripping them off. Let's go in there once and get all the work done that we need to get done, and then start that healing process of restoring this natural space. The restabilization work and the restoration work currently is scheduled to be underway in 2024 and 2025. But with something like this, when we're dealing with organic material, natural plantings, we know it takes an ongoing management plan, and the city of Clive has signed up for that as well. The city of Urbandale is also doing some extensive work to beautify and restore the natural space where they will see disruption in their part of this project. I just mentioned, I'll state it again, 24 and 25 is when we'll see much of that reforestation and habitat restoration work underway, and then that ongoing management plan for 2026 in perpetuity in the city of Clive. And I know similar plans are underway for the city of Urbandale as well. Second point where you will see an immediate disruption, trail closures, including the spurs that come into the main spine of the greenbelt from the neighborhoods. Those will need to be closed for safety purposes. This big equipment that's going to be used to dig the sewer is going to be using the trail to move in and out. So trail condition itself is going to get pretty beat up. More important than that, though, we want to make sure we keep things safe for folks. So please, when you see those trail barricades go up, when you see the signs that go up at the entrances at the neighborhoods, please respect those. We don't want to see anybody get hurt here. We want to make sure these contractors can efficiently and as safely complete the work as possible. It's going to be from the start of the project forward. When the trees are going down, that's also another time when we don't want people back there getting in harm's way and potentially causing an accident. The trails will need to remain closed for many, many months. There may be some tailoring and some pragmatic choices we can make as we see the project progress. But again, tonight we want to give you, it could be a pretty sobering reality, and that could be that at least in the Clive portion of the trail, it could be closed until summer of 2025. But when it would be opening, it would also include new trail that would be extending, the work would be underway to extend the trail west of Alice's Road, where there is no trail today, and that could be coming online in spring of 2026. There are some efficiencies we realized by sort of getting the trail in all at one time as opposed to going bit by bit. The underpass that's there at Alice's Road right now, our plan is to continue using that so nobody has to worry about going up over the top of Alice's Road. Finally, and then we want to get into questions. There are a lot of ways to stay involved with this project, and we hope all of you will, especially early on as we're working near backyards. If you have specific concerns or if you have places where you know you've had some landscaping sneak out into the public property, let's talk. We want to help you prepare as best as possible as we go into this. We can't guarantee that all of that, if you've had some encroachment into the public property, if we're going to be able to preserve all of that. But at the very least, let's have a conversation and then also talk about some of the specific restoration that we might be able to bring in the areas that are near your backyard in Clive. The project pages for each city, for at least for Waukee and Clive, are listed here. There is also a link on the city of Urbandale's page that takes you to the Waukee page, which is specifically about the sewer. Those pages that the links you see there for Clive, the top one is for a page that will have the link to the Waukee sewer detail, but then also additional details about our restoration work and the trail replacement. And then if you'd like to again sign up for those project updates, simply have to email littlewalnutcreek@cityofclive.com. And with that, we are ready for questions. Before we get into those, I want to make sure that, again, that we have everybody in the meeting who wanted to participate remotely. And a reminder for everybody participating remotely, if you would put your questions into the chat, we'll be able to take those then as they come in. But while we're waiting for those first online questions to be submitted, are there questions for the folks who are here with us in person?
I'm not close to Little Walnut Creek. I'm south of it. Shadow Creek. But number one, you think Alice's Road is gonna last another 3 years? I mean, it's in pretty bad shape, guys.
Yep. So for the folks online, the question was a lot of work, a lot of investment. Will Alice's Road last until we get to the point where it maybe we can't go any further with what we've got? I'm going to ask my colleague Jeff May if he would come forward. See, this is why you bring the whole team to the party.
I have nothing magical to do,
But we need you right here so people online can hear you too.
Nothing magical to get it done any sooner. A lot of it is dependent on funding, planning. The design is probably a 2-year process, so there's a lot of work. We're aware of it. We're going to start on the south end, working with Waukee, trying to get some additional funding to help ease the strain on the communities. We'll do our best patching, and we know that's some things we're going to have to do. We did some patching to the south. We've done some through there, and we'll continue to do it as we can to, we're not going to make it a new road, but we'll keep it as safe as we can in the interim.
Second part of that is there a plan to go beyond from Meredith to the 44 to the Grimes Road?
That's an Urbandale question.
Yeah.
That's an Urbandale question.
Well, that's an Urbandale.
John?
So while John's coming up, when John's coming up, but the question was, and this is directed for the city of Urbandale, north of Meredith, what are the plans potentially to extend widening of Alice's Road north up toward border with Grimes?
Right, and again, we call it 170th in Urbandale, so we got a whole different name for it, but sure. So basically, we are currently reconstructing from Meredith up to Waterford Road. We're about halfway, we're up to the elementary school. So next year we'll finish up to Waterford. As far as going north of Waterford, that's currently in an out year in our capital improvements plan, mainly because on the east side of the road, Urbandale only goes another half mile. The west side is in the county. North of that half mile is outside of Urbandale. So there need to be some annexations and some things before we would continue going north. And as you can imagine too, with the drainage way that goes through there, there'll be some significant grading and things that'll have to occur as well.
Okay, and again, for folks online, you can submit your questions via the chat right here in front.
I just had a quick question about the expansion between Meredith and Waterford. I'm trying to figure out how to say this slightly. I feel as though it's degrading quickly, the quality of materials. There's a lot of dips and potholes and things.
Yep.
Was that just a temporary thing?
Correct. That is temporary. Don't want to point fingers, but we had some holdups this year due to utilities. So it was our choice to either put it through on temperatures that weren't ideal, that we were hoping it would last, but it hasn't, or leave it closed all winter. So we figured keeping it closed wasn't really a good option. So we've done what we can. Like I said, unfortunately, it's kind of would be your normal street pothole problems. We keep going above freezing and below freezing. And again, we just had some temporary asphalt we were hoping would hold that really got installed on some frozen ground to begin with. That unfortunately is not holding up. So we're working on trying to keep it as passable as we can, but yeah, that is a temporary thing. Just unfortunately, again, we didn't get as far as we wanted to before winter came, so it got to be a much longer transition than we intended.
That's nice.
Yep, it's like, that's what we figured. We wanted to have it open, but unfortunately, like I said, it's not the way we would have liked it.
And do I have a quarter? Can I ask one more?
Sure, no, go ahead.
As far as those of us that will be directly impacted where the creek runs behind our home, to get a better understanding of the trees that will be cleared and the access for the machinery and all of that, is that a question to ask back at the tables when we break into small groups? Or, because I'm trying to figure out moving north or south of the creek, east or west of the creek, like where is it going to?
Why is the construction? Nothing
Right.
to do there.
Right.
Sure, sure. Yeah,
Yep,
Rudy, so the question for everybody online was, how wide is the sewer construction easement that is running near backyards in the areas in Urbandale, Clive? And what sort of preface for that, remember that at this point, there are no private property implications, right? There are no construction easements that we need to get from private property owners. It's all on the city of Urbandale, Clive, and Waukee at this point.
So can we
Thanks.
assume if it will basically come up to our private property? Pretty much. or-
It varies, and there's maps in the back that we can look at, and we can look at your specific parcel, and we can see where that construction limit, the width varies along there. We were trying to, again, run parallel to an existing sewer, so we had to maintain horizontal separation. We were also trying to preserve some trees. We did a tree survey ahead of time to identify those high quality, high value trees. And so we made some adjustments. We may have, our permanent easement is 30 feet at the end of the project. Our temporary easement is closer to that 80 to 100 feet, and that varies again to accommodate not getting too close to the stream bank itself. Or if we are close enough, then we're having to do stabilization efforts there. So we really flip-flopped that width of that easement, because when they dig the sewer in, they're piling dirt, they're piling the materials on one side. Typically, that easement is a little wider on one side, but we've flipped that all through the corridor to accommodate other constraints as we went east to west. So we can look specifically at yours property after this.
I've got a couple questions, actually. The 2-year shutdown period in Clive, can we expect, or would it be prudent to expect the bike path resurfaced and redone after you leave?
Yes. So the question was that with the 2-year shutdown for those online, with the 2-year shutdown, is the expectation for the bike trail to be paved back once the sewer is installed and restoration is kind of taking place. So when we say surface restoration, that includes kind of the bike trail paving, and then the turf or the grass seeding, and then the tree planting. And so with Clive and Urbandale, it's a little different how we approached it. Our impacts east of 156th Street, we really have one perpendicular crossing of the trail over there. So once we dig that sewer through there, we intend to put some temporary granular down, or if the weather allows for the concrete to be put back, we'll put that back in place. So it depends on timing once the contractor passes that crossing. And then really there's no further trail impacts until you get up to 156th Street and you have the horseshoes up and downs for the trail crossing of the roadway. So there will likely be closed until we complete our construction there. We'll pave back the trail impacts in Urbandale as quickly as we can. But the stretch on the west side, half mile, we get to the corporate shared boundary of Clive and Urbandale. The stretch of trail, and there's a good chunk of it that will be removed with sewer construction, that will be paved back by the sewer contractor. Again, that's timing when they get to that. If it is still the weather allows for concrete placement, they'll do that. But because it's so long of a stretch, we probably wouldn't do a temporary granular to reopen it for a period of time until we get to the favorable weather temperatures for permanent concrete placement. In Clive, they intend to do their trail paving once they've done their stream bank restoration. So that one will be a longer stretch. It will be closer to that 2 years when that section of trail will be closed from now till then.
Okay, and one other question that's prudent, I believe. West of the tunnel on Alice's, that 20 acres Clive owns, and the project was always to be a park. So you're gonna go through there with bulldozers and have everything going up. What in fact, is that gonna perpetuate that park being built, or are we gonna come back and revisit that in 5 years?
Yep, so the park has been identified by the council as a sort of future project that they're interested in continuing to pursue. It's part of our plans, our land planning for that area. In fact, the council visited the space about 12 months ago, and at that time said that they really would like to see it be the kind of park that is preserved as a natural type space with soft trails and other things like that. But as part of bringing the trail through that area, there will need to be some disruption. The trail functions not just as an amenity for the neighborhood, it also functions as access to get back to the existing sewer that's there right now for ongoing maintenance and making sure it's in good shape and serving the communities. One more point, though, I think on your question, I want to double check with Richard Brown, my colleague. Width of the trail when it goes back in, has that been determined at this point? Okay, the trail right now, we're planning for 12, which would be wider than it is today. And that would then continue further west, though that detail could be amended depending on construction feasibility and other points that come up in the future. But trail's coming. Trail was sort of promised to all the neighborhoods as well. Getting the trail in there, sort of on the heels of a sewer project, means that we don't have to go and rip things up twice, but in fact can get in there and do it all at once.
How many miles of new trail from Alice's to the west will there be when this project is finished?
Sure. The question for those online is how many miles of new trail will there be to the west? It's sort of a fun question to answer. I can tell you the distance from Alice's Road to Warrior Lane is about a mile. But I can also tell you that the city of Waukee is going to do amazing things in their community as well to keep connecting that green space and those trails with other places that we can all go to. I mean, if your experience is like mine, when I ride with my family and my kids, I get in there and I'm not quite sure, except for the signs, when I'm in Urbandale, when I'm in Clive, when I'm in Waukee, I want to have that great experience, right? Connecting all of these trails and all these green spaces. And that's a big part of what we're going to accomplish with this. Yes, sir.
I have a part question too, so I'm asking that.
Mhm.
But as far as the reforestation and the grass seeding, is there an outside company or is Waukee responsible for that? Who's responsible for the grass and trees replacement? I'm going to refer back to when Clive did the water detention area, the grass replacement was less than satisfactory. The company didn't do well. They're still trying to get grass.
Are you talking by a stormwater wetland that
The water retention.
east of Alice's?
East of Alice's.
Yep.
There's not grass in.
Right.
So is it Waukee's responsibility, Clive's? Are we looking at a new country here since you've done that project?
Sure. So the question for those online, and then I'm going to pass off to my colleague, Richard, was the restoration activity. Who is responsible for it? What is the kind of practices, some of the best sort of design standards that we would be reaching for as we go in and do that restoration work? Did I get your question right? Okay, Richard.
All right, perfect. So a couple different things related to that. So as part of the contract that we are working on the design of the stream bank improvements, they also have ecologists and botanists on board with that, is helping us kind of design what the most appropriate seeding packages are, what's the best species of trees to go in there. And so we expect that from when the sewer line is done and the stream bank stuff is done, it's going to take us about 3 to 5 years to get that looking really good. So Waukee will have a seed spec that they put down on the ground that starts to get things reestablished. And then we'll come in after the stream bank and the trail are done and start to add the trees and the shrubs and those things. So it's probably going to be about a 3 to 5 year process to get it looking good, but slowly working on the way. We're working with ecologists that will really help us make sure we get the right look to make sure that, you know, it's the right product we want at the end.
And to acknowledge your point about the challenges with the banks on that stormwater wetland that we constructed there. You're right. The growing conditions that we've been trying to work in the last 2 years have created some challenges for us, but it's not one that we're walking away from and saying it's done, right? managing stormwater, managing water resources in that area is absolutely critical, or else we end up with some of the big erosion that we see up and down Little Walnut Creek right now. So making sure the wetland is performing well and that the banks are stable is key to keeping that in good shape, which in turn is key to keeping the entire Little Walnut Creek corridor in good shape. But appreciate the question. Let me come back to you. I just want to make sure if others who haven't asked a question yet have a chance, and I want to get a couple from online too. Anybody here in the audience? Well, let me take, yes, sir.
Besides restoration where the work is being done, is there any other additional, tree removal or tree clearing and stuff, cleanup within the existing forest land that will happen? I think, in Clive and Urbandale, a lot of the invasive species were cleared out, cleaned up and stuff like that. Is any of that gonna happen?
Sure.
Through that corridor?
Yep. So the question for folks online was, besides the tree work that needs to be done for the construction of the sewer, how is the city of Clive going to be taking care of invasive species that are in the broader corridor as we build a healthier habitat? So Richard, go ahead.
So one of the things that we wanted to do when we're looking at this whole thing, not just as a sewer, not just as a trail, not just as a creek restoration project, we also asked the ecologists that we're working with to take a look at this whole corridor. So between the east Clive city limits all the way to Warrior, and then taking all the fingers that go north and south but connect that. It's about 150 total acres. Only a fraction of that will be impacted by the actual stream bank, sewer, and trail projects. So we're having the ecologists look at that entire corridor and say, what type of species do we need to take out of there? What things are invasive? And then what are the right things we want to put back in there? What type of species will thrive in these areas and really have a positive impact? So we're working with them on an entire restoration plan for this entire green belt between those areas. And then that will work to implement that along with the other projects as well.
That's partly why if you walk back, I'd love to walk back in there, you see outside the construction area, some other trees that are marked with ribbons or with tags. The reason for that is they're being evaluated for their suitability for future habitat restoration and building around them. Or if they're invasive, they'd be the kind of thing that we want to make sure we get out of there and make room for some better species. Let me take a question from online. One moment. All right. Erica Cook asks online, there are not many trees that are identified to save. How can you mark more to save that? Those that may not be specifically native to Iowa. Richard, I guess I'd ask for your help to answer this one as well, sort of why we have a preference for some of the native species, and also why with potential, maybe Rudy, why in the construction easement area, we really need to create this space that's necessary. So Richard, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things we did, there's a certain amount that we can save and there's a certain amount that we can't. So I know Pete and Rudy and others have mentioned before, you just need a certain swath to construct a sewer line. We don't really have any opportunity to save trees within that. We're doing our best to save some that are kind of on the edge of that. And when we kind of look at trees on what we want to plant back in there, we look at trees that generally are going to do really well without taking over the environment. So sometimes what we see with invasive tree species, a good example of that might be, they're called tree of heaven. What they'll do is they'll take over and dominate the entire landscape. So they're the only thing left. That can include actually growing so thick that nothing grows on the ground, and it creates more water quality problems. It creates erosion problems, which creates then issues with infrastructure. So what we want to do is we want to pick the right species that will work the best in this area together with everything else we do, from the plants, the grasses, the shrubs, and all the other trees out there. So that's why we kind of try to pick trees, shrubs, grasses, and flowers that really do well in this environment.
I think Richard answered it.
Okay. The other point I would add there is, when you go and look at how much cutting has already happened on Little Walnut Creek in some areas, it is vertical. It's multiple 10, 15, maybe even more in areas as well, creating some real challenges for stabilizing the bank, but also creating some real potential for getting into infrastructure that's there today or could be there in the future, and also private property. Controlling that erosion today creates a more stable condition for us to restore the habitat and have reforestation and plantings that are going to survive more likely than if we don't go in there and do that erosion control at this point. Let's get one more from online. Question was, what does construction limit mean on the stakes with pink flags? Rudy, I'll pass that one off to you.
So the construction limit staking that you see out there with the pink flags, that is the edge that the contractor can go or work up to. So there's two parallel lines out there, right? And I mentioned that it varies in width. You know, one side may be wider from the center line of that sewer than the other. But essentially that's the hallway that they have to work in. And certainly in conversations with the contractor, he'll say that that hallway is too small. But there's construction methods and a means that they'll have to work through to make sure that they're within that boundary, really. So anything outside of that is out of bounds. So that's what that represents.
And then within the boundary, knowing that a lot of it, almost all of it probably does need to come out, we'd also though have a chance for conversation still, some pragmatism where it does make sense, but I don't want to give people false hope when it comes to that. If it's in the hallway, in the construction area, it is possible that those trees are all going to need to go, except for those we've specifically marked already for saving. Gentlemen in the back, you actually have been waiting patiently. Do you still have a question or?
Well, I guess two now. What's the timing of the new trail going west of Alice's Road? Does that go in right as soon as the sewer work's done? And then the other question was, is there any kind of penalty if they're outside of the hallway?
Let me take the trail question first. So we're working in seasons here, we got to give ourselves a little bit of cushion as we talk about something that's going to be happening in 25 and then 26. But at this point, we believe that the trail that's existing today up to Alice's Road will be closed until summer of 2025. And that the new trail west of Alice's Road, and Rich, I'm looking at Richard here so he can shake his head violently, you know, tell me, Pete, you're way off here. No, we're thinking that that would be in 2026, that would be completed. Okay.
And I'll answer that second.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
What penalties does the contractor have if they step out of that construction limit? We do have in there for some financial penalties that would relate to tree damage. Certainly those trees we have identified to be protected. And really we've identified those that are on that perimeter. We believe that construction activity can happen that won't damage really the drip line or within that drip line, the root system really. So there's a financial penalty in the contract specifications that spelled out there. If they step out of bounds, you know, it's called a grass area, they'll be responsible for restoring that. But there's no fine that I can slap them with there, but certainly there's other contractual methods that they have to abide by. So really at the end of the day, they have those hard deadlines, and then there's liquidated damages that would apply if they don't meet those deadlines.
Gentlemen, another question.
Well, I've got more than one, but.
Okay.
Specifically, what's the criteria for the stream bank restoration? Is it just the incline? Is it the sharpness of the curve, or what's the criteria and how will it be restored?
Yep. So I'd like to have my colleague Ray, our water resources engineer, join us to answer that question. The question for those online was, what is the design standard or criteria that's applied to decide how do we address an oxbow or some other bend in the stream that's there today and get it to a more stabilized position that we can live with in the future? Is that accurate, sir?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Ray.
I really wish that it was a one variable solution, but it's not. So we had our consultant go through and evaluate both the bank hazard erosion index of how much sediment might be coming in the area, but also the likelihood of that sediment coming in. So in places that are very steep banks, but the stream center line isn't near those banks, or when we are done realigning is never going to be near those banks, it's possible that they might stay that way. So how risky is it? How likelihood is that risk? And then additionally, we've got, so those are sort of the hard parameters on the stream. There's also interest in preserving the infrastructure that we just put in. So trails, sewers, people's, property lines, making sure that we're making, that those are stabilized. And then, and then some of the more fun features are creating more habitat that is hospitable to our aquatic species, and then also providing areas for people to be able to get into the river. So not in order of priority, but it is a moving calculus that has a bunch of different parameters. If you have more specific nerdy questions, I would love to answer them.
Okay, let's take one more from the audience, then I'll go back to the folks who are online.
Well, this probably is relevant just to me and my location specifically, but I'm on 160 Tanglewood, I'm a couple houses off the Greenbelt. So as I walk down and walk the Greenbelt, which I thoroughly enjoy, and I realize it will be a hiatus 2 years, and that's okay. But there is an area that's like a horseshoe that's holding water. And it's been there since I moved there, back in 10.
Mhm.
And it looks like, for lack of better vernacular, just a place where mosquitoes breed. Is that, as long as you're going down inside, and I know flags are there, are you in fact going to drain that body of water and keep it open and drain it back into Walnut Creek? And do something in terms of construction to eliminate what I see as an eyesore and this backwater.
Ray, we'll want to look at the actual map so we can identify this, but if I recall right, I believe we're talking about a natural or constructed oxbow that's on the north side of the trail today. Is that correct?
No.
It's on the south side. All right, my fault. Right, okay, I know where you're talking. Okay, so I don't know the history of how that came into being. Ray, I don't know if you know how that particular horseshoe was, oxbow was formed.
Oh, if you're asking me about history, I cannot.
Ray and I have only been with the city for about 5 or less years at this point, but
That might be better if we could look at a map.
Okay.
to try to
Yeah.
walk through that answer.
yep, we can walk through that and understand exactly where the construction easement area is today. In general, oxbows, as you might see in other parts of the Greenbelt or other parts of the metro, can serve a lot of very beneficial purposes for controlling the power of water, adding additional flood storage capacity, and building habitat as well. Now, in this situation, it may be that we've got just an area where the stream used to be that is so silted in that it doesn't really have water. It's not deep enough to have water in it all the time, which maybe creates some stagnancy there as well. But let's talk about that with when we're back there looking at the maps. Okay, let's take another one from online. Next question. I understand this will benefit the residents of Waukee and developers. Why weren't the proper size sewers pipes put in when this was developed? Surely you knew Waukee was expanding and would need this. I'm gonna kind of say I understand the frustration. I'm not sure any of us were prepared for how fast Waukee would be growing, that this day would arrive when it has. But one thing that is absolutely certain for residents in Clive is that the trail was always going to be something we wanted to bring out to all of our neighborhoods. And that work, along with the stabilization work along the creek, so that we weren't cutting into those private properties as well, is something that the council has been committed to for many, many years. And you see represented also in the early planning around our neighborhoods that are west of Alice's Road. For the neighborhoods east of Alice's Road that have been established for some time, where there's quite a bit of property that comes right up close to where this will be a very affected area. I've got a lot of empathy for your experience. This is going to be a disruption in a place that you've come to think of as your backyard. But what I hope you also hear is that even though the timing on this isn't what we would have chosen had we had a crystal ball, we're absolutely committed to restoring this area so that it's better than what we are working with today. I should think our council, at least Clive, and I'm sure I'm speaking also for our friends in Waukee and Urbandale as well. Getting these corridors right is a big, big part of what makes Urbandale and Clive and Waukee living so awesome. If we don't do this right, we've really missed the mark. So we're putting substantial resources behind getting this right and sticking with it over time. Infrastructure, whether it's gray or green, requires maintenance. So as we do it, it's not set it and forget it too. It's also committing ourselves to that long-term maintenance of these beautiful spaces. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question back to that.
Mhm.
The trail there, it's water seepage that comes over will that be fixed as you do this project so that, ice that forms there, and then anytime you get a heavy rain, you get a lot of water through there.
That's right. Yeah. So I believe there's also a pipe that runs underneath the trail at that point too, because this area is not too far away from the drainage, the standpipe that drains the wetland down into the creek as well. I'd suggest maybe we take that one to the maps So we can look specifically at it and then we can mark that for our ongoing work as we do the restoration work for Clive.
Okay, so there's a pipe there, wide area that was.
That also, there you've got the overland stuff. Okay.
Yeah. To that. I'll add to that, through the whole corridor, and certainly this was some feedback we got, working amongst all the city staff, was putting in sub drains on those uphill side. So when you do a sewer trench, you have to backfill it and you have to compact that material. And really what that does is creates a wall for groundwater to hit and come to the surface. So we have in there, and we can look more specifically at the construction drawings if we have sub drain called out for that location. But we have called out those locations on the uphill side of that trench where we anticipated that seepage to come up and have an impact on trail use, icing, or just being wet all the time. So I'd like to take a little closer look at that location with you. And Forrest brought a set of construction drawings and we can answer that a little bit better than up here. So, yeah.
Let's take one more from online. Okay, so the question is, we live in Shadow Creek Development on Creekside Drive in Clive. Are the trees marked that you will save? Honestly, we love the space we live in. We appreciate your care of resources, people, and animals. We've seen eagles, seen a herd of 2 types of owls. Parliament, that would be a parliament of 2 types of owls. And another person has told us there are 3 different types of owls behind our home. Many other types of wildlife. Has an animal study been done? So let's take the wildlife question first.
Yep. So I mentioned earlier on that we're utilizing SRF funding, the state revolving fund. And so there's requirements that we had to do a environmental assessment through the entire corridor that we anticipated impacting. So that's looking at the threatened endangered species list that the state has, as well as the federal group has. And so we evaluated that, and hence we mentioned about dropping trees here in the month of March. There's 2 endangered bat species that require that. So beyond that, I'm not aware of any specific bird species that has impacts to that or required us to do any other special construction. So I think I took this comment earlier about the owls. We're not aware of any roosting owls or whatnot, but we're happy to, if you're aware of those, we're happy to reach out to our resources with the DNR or any other bird group to see about re-nesting or relocating, or what's the opportunity there, or will they naturally do that on their own? So happy to take any more specifics if there are online for that one. So.
Thanks, Rudy. So that's all the questions we've had online at this point. If I've missed your question that you submitted in the chat, please, if you would drop me another note here and I will bring that back to the top of the deck. Any other questions here from the group before we talk about this project is all standing around the maps in the back? Let's take a moment to see if we have some questions online. Any other questions online? For those online, this meeting is being recorded. We'll post our recordings on the appropriate sites. So your neighbors, if they weren't able to join us tonight, can come and see the recording and see all of the ways that you can follow what's happening with this project. We really would appreciate that help reaching out to them. We're also making phone calls and sending mailings so folks are informed. Big people are busy and we know that maybe they haven't heard yet. We don't want to surprise people if we can avoid it, especially as we start doing this tree work. So thank you in advance to everybody who helps us spread the word to neighbors and as being who chooses to be a good neighbor to everybody who lives to their left and right and across the streets. One last call for questions online. Seeing none, I am going to stop our virtual meeting and thank everybody who participated by Zoom. And for those with us here tonight, if you'd like to hang around, we've got a lot of staff here to help answer questions back looking at the maps. Thanks, everybody.